Okay, so the first case application is always to consider the person and who you are working with for person-centered care. So this is an individual who was very independent, a very independent woman in her late 60s. She lived alone. She was retired. She was very involved in the community. She previously kept her house spotless. She did all the cooking, money management, driving, and home management. So very independent. Her previous hobbies included community music and arts events, traveling, cooking, and then she experienced an acute ischemic left ACA stroke, anterior cerebral artery stroke, with resulting hemiparesis of her right side, which was her dominant side. So her FACEIT to ACIT profile, following the team assessment, the team determined that this individual's FACEIT abilities were less impacted. Her ACIT abilities were more impaired, so the treatment focused more on the ACIT side rather than the FACEIT intervention. And I put there the 1-3, and that's what you would use the tips to be able to figure out. There's the severity rating for FACEIT, and then ACIT is more severe, so that second number is larger. Her main breakdowns, so following her brain injury, she demonstrated difficulty generating options and exhibited rigidity in her thinking. She often came up with only one option, which was often the way she used to do it, and then she would jump right in. But due to her hemiparesis, that option may no longer have been safe. So for example, a box was delivered to her home and it was getting wet on the doorstep, so she attempted to move the heavy box herself. But her balance, her strength, her coordination was not safe for lifting and moving such a box. She saw no other options. She said, I had to move it. It was getting wet. But she could have opened it up on the porch, moved one item at a time. She could have phoned a neighbor for help, covered it with a tarp or a blanket, and any other solutions that y'all could think of. So successful strategies. During therapy, the interdisciplinary team cued her to stop and think of more than one way, considering her pros and cons for each of the options she could come up with, and then decide on the best, safest option. So a lot of times we'll come up with a visual cue, probably a stop sign, for her to be able to picture that in her mind. And she could put stop signs in various places as a reference for her to remember to use that strategy. The therapist introduced the model that the treatment team would decide who was going to take the lead in initial education on the model. And they used the provided worksheets to lay the framework of understanding, applying the concepts to scenarios that were given. And then for homework, this particular patient would log functional examples of the problems she encountered at home, as well as successful times that she was using the strategy. And all this increases her awareness. So she's not only doing it within the therapy clinic and within the therapy rooms and with those particular therapists, but having to log these things at home helps her to be able to generalize to a different setting. And she needed to do that independently. She began generalizing in functional spaces around the clinic, the kitchen, the apartment, the family room, and then she started using the FACEIT model at home to generate safe solutions for opening cans, cutting items in her kitchen, etc. And one specific example of the patient's independent application of her strategy, when she had difficulty using a knife with one hand to cut food, she instead was able to come up with a different solution using a pizza cutter. So that was one-handed option for her. Overall, as a result of the implementation, the patient's quality of life, her investment in the program, and her independence in the home improved. So that was a case that the treatment team emphasized and worked more for the ACIT side. And this second case application is one where the treatment team emphasized and educated and instructed more on the FACEIT side of the model. Yeah, based on the patient's needs, of course. Okay, so case background. This is a woman, this is case 2. This is a woman in her 40s. She had a history of insecurity and poor confidence. She lived with a mild learning disability that went undiagnosed until her adulthood, which made it difficult for her to get through school and read and concentrate. She also found herself in abusive relationships. She became good at masking her difficulties. She was not good at asking for help, and she lived with anxiety. Her style was characterized as avoidant even before her accident. And then she experienced a traumatic brain injury from a fall with a resulting mildly decreased thought organization, problem solving, and attention. So because it was only mildly decreased, that's one indicator that the ACIT side would be a little bit more fluid for her. She wanted to return to work to an office setting where she had previously worked, and there were some personality conflicts in her workplace even before the accident. She worried about appearing that she was performing slower or at a lower level than what she perceived would be expected by her coworkers. So her FACEIT to ACEIT profile, following the team assessment, the team determined that this individual's FACEIT abilities were more impacted than her ACEIT abilities. So the treatment focused more on the FACEIT side than ACEIT intervention. And so her numbers are flipped there. She had a more severe FACEIT rating score, 3, and then a lower severity rating for ACEIT. So her main FACEIT breakdowns, we laid these out with some of those words that we had talked about when we were zipping through the FACEIT side of the model, but these are much more expanded on in the manual. Context, so certain personalities at work, which might set her off a little bit. Those who judged and being around those she had previously had conflicts with at her work. Situations where she was compared to others, and she feared that she would not be able to keep her job. So those are just contexts, environments, and topics and things like that that would put her in a state of heightened emotional sense anyways. And then pitfalls. Her avoidant style would be considered a pitfall, even though that was even before the fall. Her insecurity, difficulty with learning, and after the brain injury, her additional difficulty with organization, attention, and problem solving. And those are pitfalls, anything that would get in the way of effective problem solving. Warning signs. So when she started to feel an emotional reaction, fear or anxiety, she would become flush, she could feel the increased heart rate, and she would feel frustrated. She talked negatively to herself, saying things like, I'm too slow, that person thinks I'm too slow, and then these thoughts made her less effective on the job and actually became self-fulfilling, making her slower. So signals and alarms. This is, if she did not recognize those warning signs, then she would have a heightened emotional reaction or overreaction. And signals and alarms are, how would she actually notice that she had, in fact, overreacted? So for this particular patient, she was eventually able to recognize the negative self-talk and her bodily warning signs, feeling flush and anxiety and those things we listed. And she was eventually able to replace it with a positive self-statement and avoid the emotional down spiral. So those are her breakdowns, and you'll understand it hopefully a little bit more as we talk about the strategies that the team did. So during therapy, the interdisciplinary team helped her become aware of her negative self-talk habit and and the team didn't craft, invited her to craft some positive self-statements that she wanted to use to combat the negativity. And she printed these quotes and posted them around her office desk. Many of our patients will put memes or pictures of these kind of things on their cell phone background so that they see them more frequently throughout the day. And this posting these around helped her more quickly generalize the strategy that she was using. Because of the intervention, and she started with the worksheet level materials, she also became more aware of and was able to recognize her bodily warning signs, and that helped her to be able to prevent the negative emotional overreactions in the moment. Overall, her self-confidence improved. She was more efficient at work because she was able to concentrate on her work rather than worrying about what others were thinking about her speed, her efficiency, or her productivity.
So Amanda just talked about 2 particular examples, case examples that we had here. Those were real examples from our outpatient setting. But we also wanted to recognize that while our setting is fairly unique, and many providers on this webinar work in different settings across the continuum of care and also in different countries with different healthcare delivery models, we wanted to spark some thought regarding the breadth of application across settings. Traditionally, we think about those problems defined in a problem-solving workbook. For example, I lost my keys, or there's a fire in my kitchen, what should I do? Not with the intention of discounting these, but we need to also be thinking about problem-solving as patient-centered and drawing from current environments and situations that the patient is actually experiencing. So here's not a comprehensive list, but just some examples of different problems that patients might come across in different settings. So, for example, in the medical realm, managing medications, communicating with healthcare professionals regarding medical needs, at home, role changes in the family, safety and independence with IADLs, accessibility in the community, route finding. At school, managing expectations, choosing classes, managing impulsivity, following rules, working in groups for group projects, making and keeping friends. At work, adaptive equipment, work hygiene, managing time and energy, learning new tasks, response to feedback, adaptive approaches for leisure pursuits. One thing that comes up often is navigating social media situations. And then obviously advocacy, ranging from a patient needing to problem solve through meeting their immediate individual needs, also all the way to asking for accommodations, figuring out funding, inclusion, equality, access. There are so many examples that we could come up with for problem solving that are examples throughout the continuum of care. At its core, the FACEIT ACEIT model is an exercise in mindfulness. We mentioned the conscious leadership group and the mindfulness anchor of the line earlier. The mindfulness strategies of the conscious leadership group have been incorporated into the FACEIT ACEIT approach. This helps facilitate heightened self-awareness and metacognition. As clinicians, Amanda and I and our group have embraced these principles when considering ourselves and our own style and reactions. We apply within our staff-staff relationships and have extended our mindfulness approach by striving to be conscious therapists. So just again, a reminder that next month, Dr. Herring, the director of our program, will be presenting for the NeuronUP Academy a webinar entitled The Conscious Therapist. And we expect to be publishing the manual for the FACEIT ACEIT problem-solving model in spring or summer of 2020. So we wanted to give you guys an opportunity, if you're interested in learning more about this model when it comes out. You can go to www.braininjuryleadership.com, and you can see where that red arrow is. There's a link for FACEIT ACEIT, and that will alert us. You'll put your information in. That'll alert us that you're interested. Or feel free, if I know this was a very speedy presentation, so if you have any questions that you want to do offline, or if you're having trouble with the braininjuryleadership.com website and you want to be alerted to the manual, please feel free to email either Amanda or myself. So we wanted to leave, we have about 10 minutes. We wanted to leave some time to answer any questions that you guys may have, and we will go ahead and reveal ourselves again. Do you have any questions on the line?
Hi guys, Brian again.
We don't see any.
Are there any questions? Maybe we have a shy group.
Well, I encourage everyone to feel free to reach out to us via email if you think of any in the future. And we're really thankful to be able to do this and share some of the learning that we've done here. So, are there any books recommended? Dr. Herring is typing an answer. We do also have references on the slide, and a lot of so these are our references. If you email us, I'm happy to give some of the references. These will also be in the manual once it's published.
And then not any other published text on this, because this is a model that was created by the group and it relies on some other text.
Right. So we have a question. Can you address patient response to the model? Do you see it as helpful? So yes, absolutely helpful. It truthfully helps us as therapists in everyday lives. I'm constantly faced with situations where because I'm working with patients, it pops into my head, oh, FACEIT ACEIT. And when I'm working with my staff, patient response to the model, it's important that when you have to develop that therapeutic rapport with the patient. And since we're working as a team, this is kind of on the forefront of our therapy from the beginning when patients are coming into our program. So the response has been very good with the model, and we feel like if you use the resources that we've developed as far as assessing the patient's emotional self-regulation and also that cognitive clear thinking component, and the team comes up with the plan, an appropriate plan, then the response is usually very good with the model. One thing, again, we wanted to just highlight is we have really skilled neuropsychologists that work with us, and I feel like that's a very important part of our treatment team because they help when those patients are very need a lot of assistance with that emotional dysregulation. They're very skilled in being able to give the team strategies so that the patients can be responsive to the model.
Before we move on to just what about patient response, we hear a lot of times that when the patients are like, I faced it and aced it, you know, and I think when they really understand the different steps for it, and that there are particular parts, especially on the face it side, where something might ring true for a particular patient where it doesn't for another patient, but when they understand it, it can really improve their awareness for why they're reacting in a certain way and what they can do to work around that. And it's good to see them be excited about, I faced it and aced it at home with this or that or whatever.
This is a great question on the line. Do neuropsychologists apply the model the same way, or does it vary from specialty to specialty? So no, that's the unique nature of that interdisciplinary team. We look at all team members as, even our physical therapists are using this model with their patients when they're doing gait training, or when they come across problems in their therapy. So the neuropsychologists, they also use the same terminology and they use the face it and ace it side that the team has come up with, or whatever plan they have for that. I would say that the neuropsychologists do help lead the team as far as when there's a high emotional dysregulation component or a behavior component. They definitely guide the team and provide leadership in that area. Great questions. I think there's another question coming down the line.
Come to see when you're typing.
I know. Oh, you're welcome.